Speak again.
Is that my cue?
No.
No.
Sarah will speak again, this time on success stories in New Hampshire beating back attacks on teachers in public schools. Then we'll have a session and question and answer session. It's going to last about 10 minutes. It's been allocated, and please put your one-part questions in the chat. And if that does not work, we'll see if we work it by putting up hands and calling on people. But that's the plan. Okay, the forum will then end with a call for action by Eric Sheldjich, and he's vice chair of the Hampton Dems. Okay. I'm starting out with my comments, which is when I attended K through 12, we did not face the many challenges that we are facing today. I truly enjoyed my time in school. There was much less questioning the values of the public education system. Support was very strong. People had faith in the teachers and overall system. Teachers, including an intern I had, really had a positive effect on me. Okay. This was reinforced as my children went through the Hampton schools. All 5 boys went through the schools. Later on, as a member of the school board back in the 80s, I became even more aware of the dedication of the administrators and teachers and was reminded of how they could influence our children in a positive way. More recently, 2 of my sons and 2 of my daughter-in-laws have reinforced my belief in how effective and positive examples teachers can be for students. During my time in the House of Representatives, I have been amazed and at times horrified at the legislation that has been proposed, and unfortunately, much of it has been passed into law. There are efforts to defund public education and ridicule the public education system overall, including the quality of instruction and the content of the instruction, while at the same time pushing and establishing public funding of alternate education systems. There is much criticism of teachers and specific objections to the curriculum they are using. Some of the criticism is backed by threatening punitive actions that could result in teachers being publicly ridiculed and even threatened with loss of their teaching credentials and therefore their livelihood. It is no wonder that many that consider joining the teaching profession choose not to, in part due to the current negative attitude. It does not help that student teachers are required to perform unpaid internships while at the same time they must pay their college university tuition fees. Many find it undesirable to continue teaching as the climate seems to be getting more negative and the future looks like it is trending in the wrong direction. I hope we can reverse the negative trend and support our schools and teachers in a manner that makes it more attractive to enter and remain in the teaching profession. This would help ensure the best possible education for the students in New Hampshire. Well, we will now hear from our subject matter experts. As I mentioned before, we're going to start with Sarah Robinson, the Director of Education Justice Campaign of Granite State Progress. Her topic is overview of the general landscape nationally and within New Hampshire. Sarah.
Thank you, Representative, and thanks everybody who chose to be here. It's a Wednesday night. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be here learning about public education in your district and your state, and I'm really grateful that there's so many of us here sharing that mission together. So again, I'm the Education Justice Campaign Director for Granite State Progress, so that means that I track legislation related to public education. I lobby in the State House on behalf of public education, and I participate in community organizing, helping communities preserve their public education system, preserve their districts against attacks that we've seen increasingly happening at a district level across the state. So I'm just going to set the table. The real voices we need to hear from are our educators, and I'm so grateful I get to share the space with Megan and Andy, who have a lot of information to share with you all. So I'm going to keep my comments super brief. The landscape that we have in the state of New Hampshire looks a little something like this, and we're not all unfamiliar with it, but it's good to sort of set the stage. We have huge gaps in public school funding. Depending on what town folks live in, students will have a different experience in those communities. We have one of the most expansive, school voucher programs in the country. We are only just behind Arizona, which is a state that I collaborate with frequently. They have a universal voucher program that is essentially where our legislature intends to take our current voucher program. We have a statewide ban on an honest education through the Divisive Concepts Law, which from here on out I will refer to as the Banned Concepts Law because language matters. And we are also, in the coming legislative session, facing bills to further defund public education, privatize our schools, and expand that, that continued ban on honest education in our state. One of the things that I really wanted to focus on while we're all here together is the path of the Banned Concepts Law that has really done a lot to shape the way teachers experience their classroom with their students. In 2021, the Banned Concepts and our voucher program were both snuck into the state budget through HB 2, which is our budget trailer law. That's where we stick all of the language that explains how we spend the money. So neither of these programs passed muster in the legislature. And when particular folks in the legislature noticed that it would not pass muster and there was a significant outcry from the public, instead of leading these bills to the House floor, they chose to sneak them into the budget so that they didn't have to go through a vote. In 2022, a bill requiring the forced outing of LGBTQ+ students was introduced for the first time. That's the Parental Bill of Rights. In 2023, it became a top priority to pass, and it ultimately only failed by 2 votes. With an evenly split floor, that is a big win, regardless of the small margin. In 2023, vouchers were expanded even more, from 300 to 350% of the federal poverty guidelines for folks to qualify. That's over $90,000 per year for a family of 4, if in case anyone's wondering. Families apply once to participate in that program and then never have to reapply for the entirety of a student's experience, that's K through 12. And locally, we've seen a lot of school boards attempt to roll back inclusive policies for transgender students in particular. Those are referred to as JBAB, JBAB policies that protect trans students. We've seen book bans and book challenges and other attempts to remove LGBTQ+ representative materials in public schools. So clearly we have a landscape that has made it very difficult for not just authentically being able to show up in school as a student, but authentically being able to teach and fulfill the role that people feel called to participate in as educators. So I have some examples of ways that communities have fought back, which I'll address later on in the conversation, but I think the folks we really need to hear from are our teachers. So I appreciate the ability to chat with you all today and happy to answer questions later. But thank you for having me. Really, really grateful to be here.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Next speaker is going to be Megan Tuttle, the president of the National Education Association of New Hampshire. Her topic is discussion examples of how these challenges are impacting educators around the world, around the state and the world too, I guess.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Megan Tuttle, president for NEA New Hampshire. I'm an 8th grade or veteran 8th grade social studies teacher. I taught 8th grade social studies for 18 years. And I think the other important hat I wear is that I'm a mom of 3 boys who all attend public school. So when I'm at the legislature testifying, when I'm talking with people, you know, I have a couple different hats to wear, but I'm a parent, I'm an educator, I'm a union thug, if you want to call me that. And they all work together somehow. So thank you for having me tonight. I'm so happy to see that everybody's here for this. Sarah had mentioned a couple different things, but before I get into that real quick, we talk about educators and teachers. NEA New Hampshire represents about 17,000 educators across the state. And when I talk about educators, I'm talking not just teachers, I'm talking about all of the education support professionals, or the ESP, that work in the schools as well. So we represent paraprofessionals, secretaries, aides, tutors, bus drivers, food service workers, custodians. Honestly, anybody that a student comes in contact with that works in a school as an educator is going to be a crucial and vital part of their education. And they're all under attack with every bill that Sarah talked about, everything, that we're going to see. I know there's some legislators on tonight, and they can, talk about the bills a bit better than I can, but they're all, attacking educators, all the bad ones. The biggest thing here is nothing here is helping to retain the educators we have in the classrooms. And we have a critical shortage of educators. I don't care what our commissioner says. He says we're bucking the trend across the, the nation. We are not. We have an educator shortage. There's a shortage of educators, teachers, paras, everybody. Some of what's not helping this is, so there was a group that met, the Educator Shortage Committee, and they just issued a report. And I know that Representative Myler was part of that. And there might be others here that I'm missing, and I apologize. But this report came out, and it was a really good report. The first draft of it, though, was rejected by the Senate Republican leadership because it did mention divisive concepts. And it mentioned that was pushing people out of the profession. That's not good. That didn't make it into the final draft, but that is a very, very real thing that's happening. So last year, a couple of things were going on. We had some bills that were going through the House and Senate, and I looked at it as a three-legged stool. And I used to talk about this when I was in the classroom with parents on parent-teacher night, where it took the parents, the teachers, and the student as, all parts of the stool to make that stool stand. Same thing in education. So when we look at the educator shortage and we look at how and why people are leaving the profession, we tried to help that last year. So we had legislation that was introduced in terms of student teacher stipends. As it was mentioned earlier, when you're a student teacher, you have to pay to have that privilege. And it's hard. And so we introduced helped introduce some legislation where student teachers would get paid to do their student teaching. It's about $500 a week. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to help. The problem is that it was passed with no funding source. So the bill was passed, but they don't have any money to fund it. I will say NEA New Hampshire was actually approached by people from the DOE to help fund it. I'll leave it at that. So we did get that passed, but again, no funding source is a problem. The other piece of it was we wanted to have some mentor programs that were actually based in New Hampshire instead of a current program that's based out of Colorado. So that was a big topic of discussion, was helping our teachers in the classrooms, having mentors, for the culture, for the climate, and for their content. The last one, as part of the stool, was the student loan repayment. And there were a couple bills that went through for that. That's another way that we are going to attract more educators to New Hampshire and keep them here. If we can help them with the student loans that they have coming out of college, that's going to be huge. I know there's so much I could talk about. I know I have a time limit. A couple other quick things. There was a letter, because this is the Seacoast Dems, right? There was a letter that was actually circulating to teachers in the beginning of this school year in your region. And the letter said, and I'm just going to read two quick parts of it: I do not consent to my child's participation in any instruction or discussion on human sexuality, race, gender identity, LGBT, equity, or social emotional learning, which is derived in whole or in part from, contains information from, or references to the following sources included but not limited to. The second part of it said, I do not consent to my child being given instruction or information on, or being subjected to discussion of any aspect of human sexuality unless I opt in writing for a sexual risk avoidance or abstinence centered curriculum during health class. And it goes on to list numerous topics. Now, I bring this up. We had support from superintendents, and they fought back and said, basically, this isn't realistic. Because what this letter was trying to do was have educators not be able to have any discussion at all about any of these topics, or have the children present if anything was brought up. That's a problem, because we can't control every single thing that's happening. These parents wanted their children not to be even around the words of anything with gender identity, sexuality, etc. Things are going to come up. I'm sorry, but they are. So that was something else. There was a technical advisory put out by the Department of Education this year, also talking about the health education. What all these things are doing, it's basically the divisive concepts on steroids. And the ultimate goal is to get it so that educators across New Hampshire can't have honest, open discussions about so many topics, and it's going to drive educators away. Now, there's a lot of bad things going on, but I also wanted to talk about a lot of good things going on. So there is something happening. I had started a group. It's called the Safe Compassionate Learning Environment, and we're working with 4 of the other New England states, and we are trying to tackle the issue of discipline and, you know, the issue of kids from leaving the classroom and coming back with a pat on the back and a lollipop saying don't do it again, all the way to actual assault, because we have teachers who are getting assaulted. I have one of my board members who was assaulted with a metal clipboard and ended up in urgent care. So this is happening. So we're trying to deal with this and figure out how we can do this. That group is going to be a start of that. The other piece that we're working on, and this will be the last thing because I know I'm getting close to time, is we are working with the Center for Digital Equity and Mary Ford, and we're working on an apprenticeship program. We've partnered with the New Hampshire, I just gotta get the name straight, the New Hampshire Registered Educator Apprentices. And what this is doing is this is going to get students into the classrooms, because if you graduate from high school and you go to school and you become part of this program, you can graduate with little to no debt. You work as a paraprofessional in a school and you get paid as a paraprofessional, you get all the benefits, but you're going to school at night to become a teacher. So eventually it's one of the best on-the-job trainings that I've seen. I bring this up because this program that we're partnering with has 15 to 20 apprentices in SAU 29. I'm sorry, SAU 21. So in Hampton, Northampton, Hampton Falls, Seabrook, and Winnicott Cooperative School District, we have these apprentices working there. This is one of the best programs I can think of to actually attract and get more students into the pipeline of wanting to be educators. So with all the bad things that are going on across the state, with all of, you know, the chilling effect that divisive concepts has put onto educators, and they're not having discussions and they've shelved books that have already been approved, with all that that's happening, there are some really good things going on in education that I think need to be noted so that we can lift them up and make sure that, you know, we keep those good things going on. I could probably go on, but I think I'm at my time, so I will stop there.
Actually, if you have anything else you want to say right now, we're doing pretty good on time.
Oh, okay. I could definitely go on. Now I have to go back to so we are part of the lawsuit that was filed against the divisive concepts against Frank Edelblue and the state. And our point on that is that the law is extremely vague and it's not enforceable because teachers don't know if they're breaking the law or not. So we had depositions and we talked with teachers across the state, and some of the things we were told and things that were happening, my dog gets upset about this too, is that, you know, they had pre-approved curriculum and pre-approved books. Those were shelved because they were afraid of what was going to happen. We had teachers who were not letting their students have open discussions because they're afraid of what content might come up. We have, you know, they don't want them going home. We had the Commissioner of Education put a website link on the Department of Education's site to the Human Rights Commission so that parents could basically tattle on a teacher. Once that link went out, the Moms for Liberty actually tweeted out that they would have a bounty of $500 for any educator that was, or the $500 would go to the parent who tattled on the educator. It's bad enough that it was $500. They later upped it to $1,000. A bounty on teachers' heads for teaching truth and honesty in education. That's what we've been facing. We have a commissioner who wants to essentially dismantle public education and really is not being shy about it. So, I mean, there's a lot. Elections matter. Votes matter is really what I think I want to end with on this one.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Megan. Next up is Andy Gushy, the president of the Seacoast Education Association. This topic is a discussion examples of what has been happening right here in the Seacoast in our SAU 21 and SAU 90 schools. Andy.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome everybody. It's a treat to be here. I, like Megan, wear many hats. I come to you as a parent of a student of a child that graduated from Winnacunnet. I have two kids, both in college now. I've been a teacher at Winnacunnet for the better part of the last 26 years, something like that. And I also come to you as a union representative as well. So I hope to tell you a little bit more tonight about kind of what's happening in the classroom to our classroom teachers, but also our support staff, all the people that support kids that aren't in the classroom, guidance counselors, nurses, and our paraprofessionals as well. I did put in the chat a little graphic of kind of how I see things, folks, and I see it kind of like this weight on teachers' shoulders that's wearing educators down. And some of it is, you know, the changing profession, some of it is the attacks, some of it is this legal challenges, but all that is kind of providing, I think, a burden on classroom teachers. And that's having an effect in some of the ways that have already been mentioned here. But let me go through some of these for you. So, you know, first of all is like, I think we have to acknowledge that here in SAU 21, SAU 90, that we've enjoyed great support from the community. Our towns, by and large, and our parents are by and large very supportive. They approve budgets and contracts. They support the school's mission in any way possible. However, we're still faced with kind of some of these challenges as well, some of the attacks, but also there's just kind of the changing nature of education. So at the top of that pyramid, it's just kind of student needs are, I think, different now than they were years ago. And some of that is situational. We're seeing, you know, developmental gaps, behavior gaps from COVID. That's still playing out over the years. You know, the principal of our school, Bill McGowan, said that, you know, COVID remote learning lasted roughly like a year, but it was going to take us many years to unpack from that. So we're still dealing with those issues. Student needs have kind of changed as well. Not only is school about teaching and learning, but it's also a place of refuge where students that are hungry, students that need mental health resources, counseling, they can get their needs met at school, but we're just seeing more and more students that have needs. One of them, and we're not just talking like students that, like vulnerable students that come from like backgrounds where they like socioeconomic backgrounds that make them vulnerable, but we're talking like all students, seeing needs of all students. Social emotional learning is kind of like a buzzword that I think some think is a byproduct of a woke culture, but I tell you, I think it's real. We also see dramatic increase in the needs of or students being identified as special needs or needing special services, which is problematic. Especially, Megan talked about teaching shortages. That special ed is one of those critical shortage areas. So in paraprofessionals, we can't find people to work with these students, and we're seeing more of them. And we're also, I think, student bodies are becoming more diverse here in the Seacoast and New Hampshire with regards to race, ethnicity, lifestyles, socioeconomic. So we've got a lot of needs to tend to. And then if you go kind of to the next level on that graphic, that professional stressors have kind of changed. Like on the surface, education may look the same. You know, you may pass school buses and the school calendars are the same, and you see the buildings, but the nature of teaching and learning is evolving, changing, and that's a stressor on our teachers as well. So like there's technological changes that are happening in the building. You know, as we migrate to online platforms, you know, Google Classroom, PowerSchool, there are more opportunities for parents to be involved, to get data on their kids, but there's also expectations that you're ready and available at any time of the day to respond. So it's technology has kind of like blurred the line between the workday and your personal life. So there's the technology, and one that's really problematic that teachers talk a lot about regarding technology is phones, social media. That's playing a large role in what we're seeing, like conflicts in school. A lot of teachers pinpoint cell phones as a distraction to learning, but we're trying to balance between, how do you leverage cell phones for teaching and learning, but you don't want kids to be distracted at the same time. Megan kind of already addressed the teaching shortages, and I can concur that it's real, it's not made up. There are teacher shortages. In like, if you ask the superintendent or the principal, they might attest to the fact that every teaching position is filled. But what we're also seeing in the teaching shortage is the pool of applicants is more shallow. It doesn't go as deep. You might only have a handful of people to choose from. We have had shortages. There was a special ed position, I think out of Seabrook last year, that never got filled, and the district had to contract for services with a private organization, and it didn't really work out. So shortages also affects subbing. When we can't get subs, then, or the pool is limited, then classes go uncovered. Largely, we send classes to the cafeteria, and then instead of a class period of instruction, the cafeteria becomes kind of a holding pen. We're also severe shortage with regards to paraprofessionals. I have to think that's largely because the compensation, they're underpaid. When you look at what paraprofessionals earn, it's paltry. I mean, literally, high school students, my daughter who worked at Flamingos down at the beach was earning more slinging coffee. So it's hard to attract paraprofessionals. It's a hard job. For the first time in years, Megan, you mentioned the teacher prep programs. UNH doesn't have any connection to Winnacunnet anymore. For over 20 years, we were a hub of interns, and it wasn't uncommon to have 10 or 12 interns in the building. Now we have none. So that's we see that as problematic. And then all the things that were mentioned earlier about like challenges, that's falling a lot on the teachers as well, feeling unsure of what to teach, what to say, how to support kids. So the next tier down is parental assumptions and expectations that we just parental expectations have changed. Although I will contend that we get a lot of support in this district, and I also think that parents are struggling with some of the same issues that we're struggling with in school. Whatever issues that kids come to school with, parents have to deal with at home. So a lot of times we're struggling with the same issue. We're just coming at it from kind of different angles. We see, I hear a lot of teachers talk about the lack of parental involvement, especially at the higher levels. It seems to be, as they progress, they get taller, the parental involvement wanes. However, I also hear teachers talk about over-involvement, that we see some parents that are overly involved in challenges, curriculum, student expectations, all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to find that right balance. We're seeing more challenges to curriculum. It's not uncommon that a principal or an administrator or the classroom teacher has to field a phone call from a parent that is upset about an assignment. There are people calling up and want to know, are we teaching the 1619 project? They have issues with books being taught. They have issues with assignments. My child is not going to do that assignment on white privilege. We hear a lot, maybe not from our community, we hear a lot in the press about charges of classroom teachers being biased, indoctrinating. We have teachers being questioned about flags, stickers, speech, comments, and it's put teachers on edge. A chilling effect. And that kind of leads into some of the political and legal challenges, bureaucratic challenges that we're facing as classroom teachers. Sarah and Megan have mentioned some of them already. But it seems that more and more of the classroom has become kind of the front lines for the culture wars, and that teachers, students, public schools are pawns in that war. Megan mentioned divisive concept, banned concepts. Yeah, we maybe social studies, because we talk about some of these current issues quite a bit, but there's probably not a day that goes by where I don't have to weigh about how I'm going to respond to a question about curriculum, about what's happening in the Middle East, that I don't think I need to be careful how I answer this. We have the influence of the state kind of bearing down on educators, graduation requirements, competencies, portrait of learners. We have the state legislator that passed a law enacting a civics exam. It's, I think, the only exam that Concord says that students have to pass to graduate high school. They have to pass the civics exam. It's a 128 question exam that's on the immigration website has already published. I think it's from 2008 or something like that. We're seeing more political challenges at school. We're seeing freedom of information requests. If you had the superintendent on this call, she might attest to the fact that here in SAU 21, she had dozens and dozens and dozens of requests. And those things, they distract us from our mission of teaching and learning. It's chilling. If you're the subject of one of those information requests, it's unnerving because all of a sudden it's beyond the purview of the district. It's getting kicked up to Concord and the commissioner. So those things are kind of unnerving. We also see kind of more litigation. In my, nearly 3 decades of teaching, I've never heard of teachers being subpoenaed. And I can think of 4 or 5 times in SAU 90 and 21 in the last couple of years that teachers have been subpoenaed, whether it's a special ed fight, a third-party lawsuit, a conflict over a disciplinary hearing, and that's unnerving as well. Nobody wants to be subpoenaed. We're also seeing kind of, I think, this hyper-localization in education. Years ago, we had Hampton withdraw. Seabrook is looking at withdrawal. When you kind of add those up, how do you operate as a cooperative high school when you have this kind of disaggregation? There were questions about state funding that weigh on the minds of educators, but also local school boards, and make funding a real issue. Again, we've done well in the Seacoast here with funding and budgets, but we've had budgets go down, we've had warrant articles go down, we've had contracts voted down, and those things are, they're hard. You can never really recover from those. You're always kind of playing catch up. And I think, our school boards and our building administrators, they do a great job of designing budgets that balance fiscal responsibility and the needs of our students. And, that's a hurdle sometimes when the community doesn't necessarily agree. So all of this kind of is weighing on on the shoulders of teachers, where I think morale is low. Teachers, I think, are burning out, are burnt out, feel the weight of the constant attacks on public schools and public school teachers in our profession. There's this devaluing of what we do. Our integrity is questioned. We've become kind of political punching bags, and that 100% is leading to people that are saying so long to the profession. I think it's driving people into retirement earlier. I think it's driving people out of the profession. They're looking for other jobs that there isn't all this, these demands and this chaos over. And I know that in our department, we lost an excellent teacher that was kind of mid-career and just decided, I can't work under the oppression of these attacks. So it's definitely happening. So that's kind of the view from the front lines here in the Seacoast. I hope I was able to shed some light on the situation. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Andy. I think you did shed some light on it. It's really, thank you very much. Sarah is going to speak again, this time on success stories in New Hampshire, beating back attacks on teachers in public schools. Sarah?
Thank you. I know it's difficult to hear about the things that educators are going through. They are our friends and our neighbors and our family members, and sometimes it's you are the one that's dealing with these things. And so I'd love to give us a little bit of a boost and realize that we can be part of the solution in a very real way. An educator's experience can only be as good as the community that's behind them, and only as good as their administration feels confident in supporting them. I have the privilege of being able to be in communities across the state who are facing crisis points in their districts, be it from like the things that I mentioned in the beginning of our time together. We have folks who are trying to ban books, who are trying to create an untenable atmosphere for educators and for folks to participate in public school at all. Really, this is, I mention every once in a while when I'm talking about the right's effort to privatize education is through a three-pronged effort. It's to sow doubt, to defund, and then fully dismantle the entirety of the system that is our common good. And they have been successfully sowing doubt, and that happens by vilifying educators through no fault of their own. Teachers are trying to do a job. They're building careers and they're taking care of our kids when they're not with us. So I found that once communities get to a bit of a crisis point, they rise up and develop fantastic organized groups of people who do care about public schools. We love our public schools, truly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in this room together. Milford's a great example of a town that was struggling with attacks on their LGBTQ+ community. It started with book bans. It evolved into a bathroom ban discussion. Eventually, they put large construction trash bags over the urinal in their boys' bathroom because the school board was conflicted on decisions around using which bathroom for either your biological or preferred, your actual gender. What happened was a student walkout and standing up for themselves and standing up for their peers, saying, actually, we all get to use the bathroom that we want and we value each other in this community. But before the kids could do that, the community showed up first. 125, 150 people showed up at a school board meeting that was discussing that bathroom ban because parents and community members were activated to support their students and teachers. Another great example is from my own community in Concord. I am on the Concord School Board. We had a parent who was not happy with the way one of our educators authentically showed up in the classroom. specifically how that educator chose to dress every once in a while. And that parent created a very difficult environment in our community, but our community banded together and showed up and said, not only is this educator valued, everybody's experience in our district is valued, and we are here for an authentic experience at school for our educators and our students. And it was an issue that was put to bed soundly because the community was willing to show up in large numbers and really put on display that deep passion and love for our schools where everyone is welcome, even people that don't agree with us. So my advice to communities is you don't need to get to a crisis point to support your educators. You can organize now. You can be in rooms together. You can have conversations, watch your school board meetings, encourage people to join your PTAs, find quality folks who have the bandwidth to be on your school board and help them run. It doesn't have to be you running, but if you find the right people and you support them and you're part of their kitchen table and they have a team of community members that they can reach out to when they have a hard decision to make, all of these are ways that we show up authentically in our community and create an environment where if a teacher is wrongly put a bounty on their head, right? If an educator is showing up in the classroom and doing their job and they receive backlash from bad actors that we know are out there, they can be confident and their administration can be confident in the fact that we know our community has our back no matter what. These educators are doing the right thing and they can feel stronger and more rooted in place. And that's how you get to more teacher longevity. You know that you're going to be supported by your community. So I hope that, if you have the bandwidth, have some conversations with your neighbors. I don't know, throw a house party, wine and cheese, right? And just talk about what's happening in your community together. Have school board watching parties. I know it sounds super nerdy, but I like to think I'm Leslie Knope in another life and that this is all, Parks and Rec, right? But it's very possible for us to create healthy, collaborative, supportive environments before we get to the point where somebody's really trying to make it hard for all of us. And all of these people in this room tell me that that's already happening in this district. So thank you all for your commitment to kiddos and to this democracy that we all share and have a responsibility in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you again, Sarah. Yeah, and that was great. I've been watching the chat box and I don't think I've missed them. I haven't seen any questions in it. So I'm not sure how fast people can type, or maybe we want to go with raising your hand way if anybody has a question. Maybe we can try that. And otherwise I might ask
I just put a question in. This is Rick Faulkner from Newton.
Oh, why don't you just say it then? Because I got it covered right now because I was getting ready to look at raising hands. What's your question?
We have a charter school that's opening. I just found out about it today. It's been in the works for a while. It's for the whole Seacoast, but it's opening here in Newton, starting in August. And I was just wondering if that, like this whole charter school thing is and they're going to use the Hillsdale College K through 12 curriculum. And I just wonder if that's part of the sort of the goal of weakening public education, opening charter schools like this.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you asked that question. And for folks who aren't familiar with what the Hillsdale curriculum is, Hillsdale is a network of colleges that serve the evangelical community. They have a very ultra-conservative curriculum that deviates from the standards that we know and expect in public accredited universities and public schools. Rick, I would absolutely, and I'm sure Megan has a lot of thoughts about this too. Charters in New Hampshire are interesting because we legally consider them public schools because they receive the same state adequacy funding per student that all public schools get. The difference is instead of property taxes making up the difference, charter schools need to fundraise to stay open and serve their student population. Charters, when done right, can absolutely be smaller learning environments for districts that need a different environment for certain kiddos with certain needs, right? They can be really helpful when a district needs to put some real concentrated energy and attention into a small student population. We are finding, though, that charter schools are becoming more prolific throughout our state without consultation to a local district to say, you know, hey, we specialize in X, Y, and Z of learning differences, right? Like maybe it's specializing in dyslexia or something like that. That's not happening anymore. We have charters that are opening with these ultra conservative curriculums. A lot of dog whistles you'll hear are classical education or Western style education. That really is an ultra conservative dog whistle, or like, I'm gonna call it out as it is, white supremacist, white nationalist education. And it really doesn't jive with the things that I value. But you know, some folks really want to send their kiddos there. Go ahead, Megan.
I was just going to add something to that. So the interesting thing I think about charters in New Hampshire is they're all public, like Sarah said. We don't have any private. But when charters first started, they were supposed to be funded locally, and the town would have had to vote on if they wanted a charter school in their district, and they would have had to fund it. They didn't do that. There was only one charter school that was funded locally. That was Pace. It was located out of right in the Pembroke and Allenstown area. And the interesting thing is that is since closed. So all the charter schools that have been open since they've started have been state funded. They realized that the money that they were given, like Sarah said, the adequacy money that every other public school is given wasn't enough. And so they actually get double the adequacy money because they knew that they couldn't run their school on what the state was giving them for money, which we've known all along. And I know Representative Myler can definitely chime in on this. But it's interesting that, you know, they were supposed to be started locally and funded locally. No towns wanted them, no districts wanted them. So now the state is the one that does it. We did get about 3 years ago, I think it was, there was a $46 million charter school grant from the federal Department of Education. It didn't pass. It wasn't, the money wasn't going to be accepted. And then the state changed essentially hands in the party that was controlling it. And all of a sudden the $46 million came in to double the number of charter schools in New Hampshire. Yeah.
I see Mel Meyer, you have your.
Let me just chime in a little bit on this. They're called public charter schools, but they're really private schools. They are private 501c3 organizations that have their own board of directors that's selected from basically the parents that are there. So these are private schools, they're not public schools. The other thing we have under Commissioner Edelblut's leadership, we've gone from about 22 to about 32 charter schools. There is a rigorous, on all fairness, there is a rigorous process for a charter to be granted. The dilemma that we have right now is that the State Board of Education, which grants the charters, is all in line with the libertarian approach to education. And this Hillsdale thing, we've now got, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 that have been granted. So on the one hand, you have people who are concerned about public school teachers, quote, indoctrinating, end quote, students. And yet here you have a State Board of Education that is granting a very biased curriculum in these charter schools that is not in line with the minimum standards that are in our current public schools. So I just wanted to give a little background to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. With that, I don't see any other questions, and just the way the time is going, it's best if we go to the next portion of our forum here. And that is a call to action by Eric Shelges Vice Chair of the Hampton Dems. Eric?
Hey, everybody. Well, that is a really interesting conversation about Seacoast Classical that's going to have a direct impact on what's happening to all of our schools. And so we want to be aware of that. And also, as we were discussing that, I was doing a little bit of digging online, and I expected to find a lot more critical coverage than I did of Seacoast Classical and of the Hillsdale curriculum. And what I did find were, local news pieces that looked to me to be essentially press releases reprinted from Seacoast Classical in Hillsdale. And so I would say, here we are all in this room. We're becoming more aware of the way in which this charter school question and many others poses a threat to support for public schools, the ones that we cherish and support so strongly. And yet there isn't that much scrutiny being paid to it in the media. So that's our opportunity to start asking some of these questions, to learn more, to do some of this inquiry, and then to start writing our local papers about what we want to see when it comes to how to adequately support our public schools and not siphon that money off and send it towards these charter schools and other entities. So that kind of brings me to my first point after I say thank you to our guests, Sarah, Megan, Andy, and thank you, Mike, for facilitating, and Chris for putting this whole thing together, and Erica for helping us convene it here as part of the Hampton Dems initiative. So my first thing that I'll say is let's get those letters written. Hampton Union, Portsmouth Herald, we've got a lot of great local outlets that are desperate for content. They really want to hear from people in the communities about the things that they're passionate about. So I'm going to put 2 links in the chat right now. These are the folks that you can email your letters to. And I am always happy to help folks. I'm the chair of our local committee's communication subcommittee. And in that capacity, I'm always looking for people who want to write letters, and I'm looking to help them. I'm also an English teacher, so you'll get great feedback from me, and I'll be happy to wordsmith whatever you need. So there's 2 links there, and then my email address I'll pop in there as well. If anyone would like to get in touch and look to get some of this material out in front of other voters. It really makes a difference for people to hear from other members of their community. And what we'll do here at the Hampton Dems is we take a lot of that messaging and we lift it up and we amplify it through all of our social media channels, our news blasts and messages that we send out. So your voice, I see Scott Blair is here. He's been a great example of this, then really kind of rings out throughout the community, and it means a lot. So getting those letters written is fantastic. The other thing where there's a lot of action is in these deliberative sessions. So for example, Hampton's is on Monday, February 5th. Winnicott has its on Thursday, February 8th. And the rest of our community is similarly there in that first week in February. And I will tell you, oftentimes these are sessions that are attended by a relatively small subset of the community with a very outsized voice in the direction they want to see public education going in their communities. And important decisions get made at these deliberative sessions. So I really encourage folks to turn out at these because questions get raised here and then they get answered. And then the only other chance you have to chime in is when you vote for those warrant articles and those budget items when you go to show up for your local election. So I encourage you, what I can do too is I can pop these dates in the chat box and we can certainly disseminate this information through our channels as well. So there you've got your deliberative sessions as well. And then our school board elections. I see Desiree Potter was here earlier. I'm just scanning the names to see if she's still with us. One of our school board members here in our community. If I've missed anybody, just kind of scanning the group, I just want to say thank you to all of the people who are serving on school committees and school boards locally. This is a huge commitment that they make and they need our support. 2 seats in Hampton, 2 seats at Winnicott, a Hampton and an at-large seat. 2 seats in Hampton Falls, Seabrook has 2 seats, Northampton 2 seats, and Southampton a seat. And these local school board elections, some of our guests talked about the hyper localization of school politics and support for public schools. Everything good that happens in public schools starts at the local level, and also many of the bad things that happen in public schools happen at that local level, at the school committee level. So getting the good people in those positions who want to be stewards of our public schools is crucial. We got to keep our eye on those races. So there's a lot you can do to get involved. The most important thing you can remember is that being here is being involved. So being parts of these conversations, connecting to members of your community, and continuing to take part and signal your support by participating in events like this makes a huge difference. And then finally, if you'd like to be involved and have some fun, the Hampton Democrats is having a holiday party. We're having it at December 17th, 6 to 9 p.m. at the Sidebar in 845 Lafayette Road. So I'll just drop that in here. December 17th, 6 to 9 p.m. And there's an awesome link there, that awesome slide. This is going to be a good time. And, you know, we talked a lot of issues, content, politics, education. You're welcome to have those conversations and also just come and have a great time on the 17th. It's important that we do all of that to build and sustain our communities and be together, learn from each other, and also just, you know, be there for each other, you know, at these times. So thank you everybody so much. Thanks to our guests. I'm going to kick it either back over to Chris or Mike to officially say goodbye. Again, thank you for being here. Also, we should just take a quick note. Our next event is January 10th from 8 to 9 p.m. Presenters Sarah Robinson, who we heard from tonight, and Sarah Elliott, also from Granite State Progress, are going to give us a little bit more of the bird's eye view of what's happening politically and what can be done to organize at the ground level to push back and support our public schools. Sarah, is there anything else you wanted to add to that little note? Looks good. All right.
I'm really looking forward to joining everyone again. It's going to be another great conversation.
Fantastic. Well, thanks to everybody for being here. It's really inspiring to take part in these conversations. It's 8:58, and I am going to stop talking and say goodbye and thank you and good night.
Yeah, well, I'll take it from here. Thanks, Eric. I did want to thank the members of tonight's forum for taking time to help us understand the challenges facing us, and the Representative Chris Munns for developing, organizing, and being the Zoom host, you know, for tonight. Eric's just covered when the next forum is going to be held, number 3. So on that note, I'll say good night and thank you very much.